Hey guys, welcome to Currently Cringing. We haven't recorded in about 10 weeks, which is insane. I haven't been okay. My health, I'm kind of going through some hormonal changes. I'm getting headaches. I actually have a headache today, but not because of that. I'm shook. Okay, we wanted to do an impromptu election podcast episode, and we've been debating all morning. But I want to go back to our last election podcast. Me and you did. Welcome. Thank you for coming on all the way from India. I don't know what time it is there.
It's midnight and I was ready for bed and I was trying to get a link from you for the last 30 minutes and you were just yelling at people in the group chat and I was like, "Hello, I need to go to bed."
Literally, I didn't even see your message. I had to scroll back and then I realized, like, oh, he needs the link because I've just been on a tangent. But let's go back to that day where we didn't know what Kamala Harris's role was going to be. And then from one day to the next, she's thrown in as the Democratic candidate without a primary.
Yeah, I think I think it was the right decision, but only because it was the only choice the Democrats had, right? Because it goes back to her name was on the ticket, right, for Biden Harris. And when people saw that Biden wasn't really going to last another 4 years, it had to be Harris. I think the problem really stems from a year ago at the primaries where Biden shouldn't have been allowed or someone should have said something. I don't know the power you have against an incumbent at these primaries, but that's when the election I think was lost.
I see. And in my case, I'll be upfront from the beginning with my views now, because at this point, who cares? It's all water under the bridge. I was not going to vote for Biden. I was probably going to stay home. And I said this, I probably was not going to vote if it was Biden and Trump. Then they put in Kamala, and I thought, okay, this is promising, but I was still torn. People are not going to like what I have to say. Trump, to me, is not an awful candidate. Just because someone is, well, how do I put this properly? He's got all the convictions against him, the felonies, the
He's a
womanizing.
convicted felon.
He's a convicted felon.
I
But
mean,
JD Vance is who scares me. And that's why I started.
weirdly, JD Vance never really factored in the math for me, but that's because I just see Trump and I'm just like, I don't take him seriously. I've actually never voted for Trump in any of the three elections. I won't say who I voted for, but I will say I've never voted for Trump.
I haven't either.
So actually, like a bunch of our chats, which have some right-wing people, a lot of us have never voted for Trump. And like I voted for like Mitt Romney before. But I've never voted for Trump. And yeah, here we are.
Well, that's why I decided to go for Kamala publicly, because I don't like extremes. And I think JD Vance will be extreme. And I'm just hoping Trump lives through his entire term. Hope he doesn't die.
I think he's got more energy than the average 78-year-old, but I understand your concern.
Yes. So we had a whole conversation all day yesterday and for the past few weeks going into this. I was of the notion that Kamala was going to win because there is no way a female candidate would lose a second time. I went against all the facts, against all my logic, and that was my final answer. And I was wrong.
Are you leaving out a very important piece of
I'll
information?
let you say it.
I actually was pretty sure that Trump would win for a while now because a few of us were tracking the betting markets, predict it, and this one French guy that runs a site called Polymarket, which you said was, oh, this is just a bunch of incels, blah, blah, blah. It was right all day, all week. Every time anything happened, it was just spot on in every state, every race, whatever you want to call it. and you were sort of dying on the hill of astrology girlies on TikTok. And I'm not going to say bad things about them because everyone's amazing and their opinions and all that. But I'm not sure, I'm not even debunking astrology because there's cool stuff with astrology with relationships. I just don't think you can use astrology for political elections and even like sporting events. Like imagine saying like, oh, the astrologer told me the Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl again this year. Like, what are you talking about? So I was just against all that.
I think my thinking was all these polls are used by the incels, who I like to call the manosphere. That's what we're calling it. All these angry young men at home. And so I saw it as TikTok girlies using astrology versus the manosphere at the polls. And I truly thought these men are lazy, right? We're all calling them lazy, dumb, and that they weren't going to leave their house to vote, that these people don't leave their house, they're incels. And
Wait,
I,
why would an incel that cares that much? If anything, that's the time they would. And guess what? With the absentee or mail-in, these incels can stay at home and they can. But I'm sure a lot of these incels did stay home. They just filled out a ballot and whatever and sent it in, right?
and that's the point that I'm getting to is I definitely underestimated them. And that's what we were just talking about before we began recording. That's what we're calling them. Women like me are also part of this problem where we are calling these men dumb and lazy, and they don't make enough money, and that's why they're not getting girls, and that's what's creating this. And that's a mistake. And now we've created this monster, the manosphere, and guess what? They're the ones who voted.
I don't even know if it has anything to do with getting girls. I just think there's, maybe there are people in the manosphere who have girlfriends or whatever you want to call it. Maybe they hook up, but they're also a group of people that's been told for a large part of their lives that they're terrible. And whatever you want to call it, it's not great to hear that all the time. And I'm just trying to be objective here and just try to diagnose what happens. I don't have a dog in this fight right now. Obviously, it's not great, but I do think that when you hear over and over again that you're a terrible person and white people or white men in particular are the end of society, it hurts. And why in the world would you vote for Kamala Harris then, right?
Yeah. And women like me think these things because of what we see online and on TV, right? We're seeing the Andrew Tates of the world, the Joe Rogans, the Logan Pauls, the Jake Pauls. And because of all of these men, women like me just don't have a good opinion about the manosphere, except the manosphere kind of decided this election.
I'd say it did and it didn't, right? I think there's so many different demos of people.
But you saw
Um,
the numbers, it was white men.
right. So that's the other thing is that yes, white men did do this, but white men tend to vote Republican in general, right? Like even 4 years ago when Biden won, I think it comes down to every demo, right? And if you look at white women, you look at the African American vote, you look at the Latino vote, I think all of it broke kind of perfectly for Trump this time, similar to what happened 8 years ago. Like this is almost a carbon copy election. And I don't know why everyone's surprised. Like we just did this.
I'm surprised because I did not think a woman would lose again in America because it is such a bad reflection on the country. And men hate women. And what I learned is women hate women even more.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to say that America hates women and, men hate women or whoever, whatever the rhetoric is. I'm not saying that's wrong. It's just a really easy takeaway. But in reality, I think that maybe they weren't the right candidates, not necessarily just against Trump, but to get the voters that matter. Because Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton, they're very good at attracting the super left. But we don't like that doesn't matter. The super left is always going to vote for the Democrats. It doesn't really make a difference. The New Yorkers, the Californians, like who cares, right? Like I'm from New York. Our vote is irrelevant. But you need to get those middle of the road voters who are in rural areas in the Midwest or the Rust Belt or Georgia, and those are the people that matter. I mean, that's just the way our country is, right? And if you can't speak to those people, that's the wrong candidate. And what I've been saying is 8 years ago, the Democrats needed to take a look in the mirror and be like, what did we do wrong? Instead of like blaming everyone else. And to an extent, they did, right? Biden was a good pick at the time, right? That was great. And then they tried to run it back again instead of getting someone who would have appeal to everyone.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And the
Go
writing
ahead.
was on the wall. I was at Diwali at the White House just last week, and everyone there was terrified. And I knew then that we're going down. And I didn't have a single person really in my life that was voting blue. Everyone I know who did vote voted red. And I was telling everyone at this Diwali, they were like, what do you think is going to happen? And I said, well, I am in Trump country. I'm in Miami, Florida. But a lot of people, even some friends in New York, are voting for Trump. I don't know anyone voting for Kamala except maybe a handful of us. And that was concerning early on. But now,
Yeah. At the same time, a lot of the people you and I know were in states that aren't really swing states. I guess the exception is like my sister and brother-in-law, they are Pennsylvania, but like there's not many other people we know in those states. So even if you do know Trump or Harris or whatever, we don't really know the people who are deciding these elections, again, with a few exceptions. And when it comes down to the polls, like who do you know who's ever been polled in your life? I don't.
I don't know anyone. The polls are wrong. Alan Lichtman, all these people, the astrology girls on TikTok, that's the
Yeah,
other
you
problem.
You cost, I mean, our friend Neil didn't listen to you, I think, but I was going to put some money down. And I got a little worried when not worried, spooked, let's say, in terms of putting a wager down, sort of an emotional hedge on Trump, because I saw that one, all these astrology things you said. And then second was that guy with the keys, Alan
Yeah,
Lichtman, you said.
Alan Lichtman. Yeah.
And and then the third thing that you said, which really is
And Seltzer.
the cherry on top was Al, and I'm gonna be drinking a lot of hard seltzer tonight. Seltzer.
I was
She
wrong. I was
she
wrong.
said Iowa was gonna be 3 points Harris, and it ended up being 12 points Trump, 14. I lost track at some point. That was the biggest L I've ever seen on election night.
The polls and the astrologers. The problem is I believe in astrology. I actually follow astrology, my own chart, and I have my own astrologer, but a lot of people are online playing astrologers. That is the problem here. It's too mainstream. Everyone's an astrologer now. But I think the important conversation is we have pushed the white man to the side. We have told him he is worthless and good for nothing. Women like me, I take accountability, and they showed out in numbers to show us that they exist.
Yeah. And I think now what I've been watching in just the post-election, mainstream media, now they've gone attacking minorities for saying like, why didn't you vote for Harris? Like, oh, like black people didn't show up and Latinos didn't show up, and it's like white women, like, what are you doing? And then they were talking about, I was watching a clip from The View. They were talking about like uneducated white women. Why didn't they vote? And then someone on The View was like, probably because you call them uneducated white women. That's why they don't like this stuff.
Yeah.
That's the reality. Like it's so condescending and demeaning that people are put into these boxes. Like it's fine to do an analysis and be like, okay, like this group of people votes for whatever, but then to shame them for voting or staying at home, that's part of the problem. And then that's why they do it. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And I like what you said earlier, and I'll take full responsibility for this because this was a huge rude awakening for me. We created the manosphere.
I think it starts from 8 years ago. I think we created MAGA. Like the liberal elites created MAGA 8 years ago, and then we did not learn from those mistakes. We had like a little mini victory 4 years later, and then the same thing happened again for reasons we can cover later, that we created the manosphere or whatever you want to call these guys, and we didn't learn any lessons. And I don't understand how this happened again. So I'm not shocked the way you are just because we've already seen it. I'm just shocked it happened again, knowing what we know. It's actually worse this time.
It's worse. And I was stunned. By 1 a.m., I knew this is over. And by 4 a.m., and I went to bed, I was reading all the tweets and all your messages, and I said, "You're right. I'm going to take the L." But I was stunned. And it's it's a lesson for a lot of us out there. We are labeling all these people. Even the way I talk about men on this podcast, I really need to check myself.
I think everyone deserves a little bit of a voice, and everyone obviously should be kinder to each other. And I'm trying to do what I didn't do 8 years ago, which is like take a look and be like, why did these people vote? I think 8 years ago, at least it was like, screw the electoral college. The
Right.
majority of the people wanted Hillary Clinton, and it was only this many votes, blah, blah, blah. I think it was like easier to not think about it. But now most of the country voted for Trump. Say what you will, that was the choice. So he won the electoral college and he won the popular vote.
He won
So
it
now you
all.
have to think, how does half the country or more than half the country want this? What are we doing wrong in reaching certain demographics of people?
And for people that are, voting based on the price of eggs, or that's, I do feel bad for those people, but a lot of people feel marginalized, and that's what we saw.
I
And
think there's
I'm
also
in a bubble, right? What are they calling the echo chamber? I'm in
echo
an echo.
chamber. You're in a lib coastal elite bubble. Although weirdly you're not, because you're in Miami, which is like kind of red now. So maybe
But
you
like you
know.
said, we have liberal values living right-wing lives.
Yeah. I just feel like people feel marginalized, and it happens both ways, right? If you think about it, in 2020, the reason why Biden won is that a lot of people felt marginalized again, and they were like angry at Trump and COVID and all these things that were happening. And then now it swung back the other way. And there were so many reasons. And I think one thing people should realize is that there are so many one issue voters out there,
Oh yeah.
and their one issue is abortion, which we all agree, pro-choice. But I think to say that the only issue that matters makes a lot of people upset, because there are many. It's like what's right for you isn't right for some person living in Pennsylvania necessarily. Maybe you and someone in Philly have everything in common, but you and someone in rural Pennsylvania, you have nothing in common. So it's not really right for you to say to that person, oh, like whatever, like I don't care about your life and your views on um I don't even know what, like, let's say immigration, right? Like the economy was the number one for most people. Inflation, immigration, crime, those are things that Donald Trump was really good, I think, at talking about. And he had a message. Like he actually ran a pretty good campaign, I think. Harris was kind of all over the place, and her message was Donald Trump is bad, don't vote for him, and abortion, right? There was maybe I'm missing something. I didn't see a whole lot of other things that were
No, you're
resonating.
you're right. And looking back, I think she did the best she could, because I do believe she was a pawn or a puppet in this. She was just thrown into this. I don't think she knew she was
Oh,
going
I don't blame Harris
to
at
it.
all. She was put in a brutal situation. I actually blame her team, because I don't know what the hell her team was doing, and like I don't know what strategies. I personally think they made a bad choice on VP. Both sides did, but like in particular, you have to look at the losing side here. I wanted Josh Shapiro for her. He could have delivered
Agree.
Pennsylvania, and he's Jewish, which Kamala's part camp tried to play both sides of the whole Gaza situation, which that was another big issue. And I think a lot of Jewish people were turned off. I know a lot of Jewish people that stayed at home or they flipped. And
Exactly.
that was because A, Shapiro, Shapiro could have changed that because he's Jewish. And B, like Harris wasn't really that strong on Israel Gaza, right?
Yeah, and everyone who, for the most part, is Arab, Middle Eastern, Muslim, they didn't see that as we're going to end the war, which is what Donald Trump said. And Harris was just kind of talking about how we will fight to protect Israel, and that's great. But she wasn't really saying that they were going to end the war in any case. Whereas Donald Trump said, I will end all wars. And
Yep.
I think the other issue, which we've discussed, which is going to be a touchy topic, because we're in our elite echo chambers, people like Vice President Harris are talking about trans, the trans community, and middle America, the person working at the coal factory cannot relate, cannot understand, does not know what you're even talking about, and
Well,
is
I think it again, this goes to the whole thing where your average coal miner doesn't hate trans people, right?
no,
I don't think so. I think it's the same as the gays. And for example, the Republicans didn't say a thing about gay marriage. If you remember that, that was always the docket. So gay people came out, right?
yeah,
Gay
gay
people
people
were,
voted Republican.
but let's say trans, I don't think anyone cares. Most Republicans don't care about trans people. What they do care about is this, trans in schools, being taught about all this gender stuff. And again, I'm not judging. I'm just telling you what I believe is going on in terms of them and their opinions. They don't like that it's being taught in schools. They don't like the fact that their girls might be competing against boys in sports. They don't like that, maybe a girl in the locker room might see something that their daughter, they don't want their daughter seeing that. And I understand that.
And we're not discussing our opinions here. We're discussing why we think this happened. What this was a debacle. It was an easy win, just like you said, had they just picked a candidate that could relate to the American middle class.
Yeah. And again, it's like the same thing, like the forgotten people, like 8 years ago. And funny enough, JD Vance wrote a book about it, which I read, Hillbilly Elegy. And obviously he became a senator after that. And those were like some of the forgotten people of Ohio he wrote about, whatever. And then we didn't learn anything. We did not learn a thing. And once again, we went back to the same machine. I think someone was tweeting about this is a repudiation against the machine, against the liberal elites. It's against all the people that have like run the country for too long. I want to say like it's almost like getting rid of I realize that Trump has been around before, but he's anti-establishment still. The establishment includes the Clintons, and then the Clintons basically were like, okay, now it's the Obama's turn. And the Obamas like, okay, now it's back to Hillary Clinton. And then it's like, okay, now it's Biden who was the VP for Obama. And then Biden said, now it's my VP. So it's like, it's too much passing the torch. And most people outside our liberal bubble don't like that.
Absolutely. And can we talk about how you've now paid Beyonce $10 million to show up at a rally? And then you have
Yeah.
Cardi B coming in. The last 3 days of this is like your Super Bowl. You're supposed to have someone there who's relatable. They bring in Cardi B, who can barely read what she's looking at on her phone. I don't even know what that was. And, I think we have to come to the realization celebrities aren't relevant anymore. You can't have these celebrity endorsements
Forget
and
that they're
think it's
relevant.
even real.
They're not likable. And I think
Yeah,
there's a lot of hate now towards celebrities, and you have like all these people that are going to be tied up with the whole Epstein list. You have P. Diddy, and everyone who supported him. So already the people are pissed off at Hollywood. And if Hollywood is like the party of the Democrats, what do you think the common man is going to vote for? They don't have anything to do with those people. And yeah, Trump ironically is a Hollywood person, but if you look at the people he brought in to like support him, it was like Joe Rogan and Dana White. Like those are the most, not I'm not even gonna say right wing, just the guys that relate to the people. And I don't even listen to Joe Rogan and all these podcast, folks. And the other one would be Elon Musk, right?
yeah.
Like That was there.
who bought X and is all about freedom of speech, and that's speaking to these people.
Right. There's so many like constitutionalists, and then you have people on MSNBC talking about how they hate the Electoral College. Like, what are you doing? Like, you have so many people in this country that are constitutionalists, and I personally don't agree with a lot of things that the Constitution did, but I live in this country, and that's just the reality
Yeah.
that you live in America. That's just the Constitution is very important to people, freedom of speech, the gun issue, right? Like all the, and you can tweak the gun issue and say, you know what, don't take our guns, but maybe not assault weapons, right? But you can't attack people's amendment rights. I think that's a big issue for a lot of folks, and that
My
came to a head.
my concern now, which we were just discussing, is do you now think, which I do think, in the big picture, the grand scheme of things, this is detrimental for us as a society because now you've uplifted these men who we have, you know, ignored. And now you're kind of telling them, calling Puerto Rico an island of garbage is okay, and assault is okay, and
Two
women's reproductive rights aren't important.
So I'm going to go through all those points. I think the Puerto Rico thing is a little overblown because Trump never said it. It was just this one idiot comedian who I don't even know who that guy is and who probably will never get invited to a Republican event ever again who said that statement. And then there were videos of Puerto Rican women saying, "Yeah, I'm going to vote for Trump. It wasn't a nice thing to say, but I don't like Harris," right? Um, that's one. And then I can't speak to the whole assault. I don't think all people in the manosphere want to assault women. I'm sure they're out there,
Not
but
all
this
of
is
them.
it's generalizations like that that make them win.
I know, but I'm saying you don't think this is detrimental for the future. Like there is already a divide, like we said, the TikTok astrologer girlies versus the men on the polls. What are we going to call them? I
But
don't,
on the betting the bet, let's say poly market betting
yeah.
crypto
These are the
dudes.
men who are buying Andrew Tate's course, and now it's like this
The
girls
Rogan
versus
tape
boys.
goes. Yeah.
Girls versus boys. We have never been more divided as a society. And now I think this is just going to widen the gap.
Yeah, I think so. But I obviously like want to be hopeful with I I I hope both sides do the right thing where the Republicans don't go overboard
Overboard.
with the amount of power they're about to have, because this is different than 2016 where Trump has the
The House,
Senate
the Senate, and
The House
Supreme Court.
and the Supreme Court and potentially can put two more justices on the court. I hope it doesn't get out of control because there's a whole Project 2025 stuff. I want to be wrong. Um, like I hope nothing really crazy happens the next 4 years. I Let's hope it doesn't. Maybe like it's a whole overblown hype thing. I don't think that the Republicans would even be okay with certain threats to democracy or whatever. So maybe my optimistic side says maybe all the branches of government working together, yeah, things that you don't like will happen, but maybe a lot of things that you do like will happen, right? If everyone's working together. So maybe the good outweighs the bad. So like maybe there's things like, we clean up the economy and, we fix all our immigration issues, crime goes down.
We stopped
You know,
giving billions of dollars to other countries.
yeah,
A
yeah,
lot of
exactly.
people are mad about that.
Stop, people are like, why am I being taxed like crazy when we're putting all this money into wars and like spending money in other places? Why is that fair? Another thing that was an issue was, housing illegal immigrants and paying money to those people, while people of this country were having issues living day to day. I completely understand why those people felt marginalized too.
Do you think Vice President Harris would have been a moderate candidate? Because I know her past, but I think she was leaning towards moderate choices,
The
and
problem is no
her
one cares.
decisions weren't Biden's choice, like
No one cares about its actions versus words, right? Like you look at Harris and what she did in her past as the last 4 years as the quote unquote borders are, right? And I'm not going to use Trump's words, but let's just say she didn't do a very good job. right? We've had a
And you're
tough
in New York
time.
City and you're seeing it.
Yeah. A lot of people coming from the southern border, a lot of undocumented people. That's just the reality. Whatever you want to say, if that's your job, she didn't do it. So people were like, if that was her job as vice president, imagine what she'll do as the president. Other Another issue, if you want to go into demographics, 1 in 4 Black people voted for Donald Trump. And I think a big reason for that is because Kamala Harris, when she was DA in California, she put a lot of Black people in prison. Um, and I think there was a whole issue with like truancy. Mothers of truant children were going to jail. There are a lot of stories that came out about that. And I was, following people on Black Twitter and they were not happy about it. And this was like months ago. And I was a little concerned.
And we've seen the deterioration of the state of California.
Well, I'm hopeful because they actually voted on some propositions that were pretty positive. Like they were, harder fines on, second time offenders, felonies, drugs, things like that. So California's getting a little bit better, but I think people are kind of fed up with crime, the immigration issue. And again, this goes back to what I said earlier. To say that nothing matters but abortion is such a holier than thou attitude. And that's coming from someone who's pro-choice, right? And a lot of people said, weigh the pros and cons. Ultimately, abortion went back to the states, and a lot of states allow abortion. So they said, okay, it's back to the states. And today, actually, or yesterday, a bunch of states voted for abortion, pro. And one of them was Missouri, which is a red state. So that was good to see. So I think a lot of people that voted were like, you know what? We're going to punt on abortion. We're going to assume the states will figure it out.
And I think I was also wondering how not only did she lose, he kicked her butt. Okay. Um, she raised so much money
Yeah.
and you know that I thought was a red herring. I thought she had a lot of supporters, but turns out again, maybe that was by the elites, given to her by the elites, and the common man was not donating.
Well, again, what does that money go towards, right? Like, obviously, you have money,
Beyonce, that's yeah.
right? Like, and then let's say you have a certain amount of money you're spending on political ads. Where are those ads going? Like, okay, during the World Series, we saw a ton of ads. Great. But where else? Like, are people really watching, mainstream news? I think what I was reading a tweet was that this was a huge repudiation against mainstream media, and people feel like they were lied to. All the polls are wrong. All the ABC News, CNN, MSNBC, like they were just completely off. Um, I'm not even going to say Fox News because I don't know quite enough about them, but Twitter, people have been following Twitter, people have been following various markets, podcasts. Like people have been hearing stuff, and that's how a lot of the common man has been getting their news. And I think Kamala just avoided all that. She could have gone on Joe
Joe
Rogan.
Rogan.
I think that was a huge mistake. He gave her the opportunity.
She should have gone, and I underestimated these people. I'll say it again. I thought the men would stay home and be lethargic about this. Instead, it was the opposite. They
But that
voted in
surprises.
droves.
I feel like men staying at home, that's just again such a stereotype. Like, why would they? If you're energized enough, you have mail-in voting, right? Like you could that's the easiest thing ever.
Yeah. My only reason people ask what is your problem with JD Vance? My concern with JD Vance is he's extreme right, and I just don't like extremes. And a few of the things he's said have been concerning. And so I can only hope Trump doesn't die.
Which is a wild statement. And the guy already had 2 attempts on his life this year. I want to go back to the podcast because we are literally on a podcast right now, and
Yes.
I don't listen to Rogan, but Rogan is like, a lot of people talk about him as like a super right wing dude. Like he voted for Bernie Sanders. you know.
Yeah,
You had Elon on, and Elon is an ex-Obama voter.
exactly.
So I think another problem is that everyone's pigeonholing like all these like right-wing incels and they're just like Joe Rogan and they're just like Elon, whatever. It's like a lot of these people aren't, it's almost like a spectrum, right? It's like sexuality is a spectrum, right? You can't say like everyone's one or the other. Everyone chooses a certain way and they can swing a little bit. And right now people are a little more right-wing, but a lot of these people like Joe Rogan used to be liberals.
And
So
I am people. I am part of the problem. I'm acknowledging it on this episode. It was a rude awakening for me because I am part of the population that's lumping all these people together.
mhm. Yeah. And I think Kamala went on Call Her Daddy, which is that a sort of a liberal podcast, I believe,
I
or
wouldn't
whatever
say
you.
it's a liberal podcast because I could have sworn just making an assumption from her lifestyle and what she looks like, Alex Cooper would have been Republican, but she had,
Is that that's the Barstool off spinoff, right?
yeah,
Yeah, and Barstool's a little right wing, so I guess that was a good place to go for her. But
but it wasn't
again,
enough.
that was the Republican women she was talking to, so she again missed a ton of people.
She spoke to them and they were furious that she was on the podcast.
Really,
Yeah,
I
there
feel
was a
like I missed that whole thing.
backlash. There was backlash for Alex Cooper for having Kamala Harris on the podcast. I heard she also invited Donald Trump. We're hearing everyone invited both candidates, and it was up to the candidates whether or not they went.
Oh, wow. I mean, yeah, it's been a crazy period. Like, so for me, I'm in India at midnight, and I've been up since around 7 a.m., which is right when the polls were closing in the US. So I've like experienced this a little differently than everyone else because you guys had your like stay up late, go to bed, wake up and see. I've just been up. Like
Yeah.
I can't remember the last time I slept. It's because I was up early this morning.
Would you also say that a big part of this is social media? Social media is part of the fraud. You're in your little algorithm, and so
Mhm.
you think Kamala's winning when you have no concept of what's actually happening outside in the real
People
world.
have laughed. People have laughed at me when I've said things like, "Hey, I follow some left wing people on Twitter. I follow some super right wing, and then some in the middle." And it's like, why? I'm like, because I want to know what was actually going on.
Same.
And I'm not like plugging Twitter or anything, but I use Twitter for sports mainly. I'm a huge sports fan. Everyone knows that. I get a lot of sports news there. And the last week, there's been very little since the World Series ended. There's been very little sports stuff. It's been all politics, and I'm following this person, following this person. And I've been seeing the numbers and what's been happening with the polls and with the markets, the betting markets, and just like digging into the data. Me and Neil, he's been posting for God knows how long about looking at individual states, the votes and the counties and things like that. And I'm like, yeah, maybe this is gonna split for Trump again.
And our friend Neil NKP, he made a massive, very interesting, very good Google Doc with a bunch of facts, all pointing towards a Trump win. And I said, look, this is great, but they're not going to let a woman lose twice. And I was
Dual
wrong.
what does that mean? They're not. See, the fact that you even say
Them,
that
the machine.
they're not going to let a woman. That's very concerning, right? Like, at least one takeaway that I have here is at least we had a free and fair election, right?
Yeah, and that's what we said. I said, if Trump wins, I will know we're not in a simulation because
Right.
I'm so used to the machine, the globalists controlling it. And so I guess
Well, this is part of the
it's a
problem. The
fair
fact that
election.
this is part of the problem that people think there's some global force like trying to stop everything. And, you know, people are still talking about 2020 if that was a free and fair election and
Did
this,
you see the numbers? Can you discuss
yeah,
those numbers?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Um, so I am not someone who's an election denier. I believe in free and fair elections. I'm just here reporting what people have been saying. There was like a huge vote discrepancy in the number of Democrat votes year by year, 2016, 2012, and this year. was all roughly the same numbers. But if you look
8
at
million-ish.
2020, so it was 65 million roughly. 2020, there were 81 million Democratic votes counted, which
20
is
million vote discrepancy.
yeah, I think there was a really funny tweet that was saying, how did 20 million Democrats just disappear in the last 4 years? Um, yeah, I'm not gonna go down a conspiracy theory rabbit hole. That's for another pod, probably on Rogan. But I will say it just adds more fuel to the fire. And it's just like, people are feeling vindicated and there's a lot. Twitter is a wild place right now. Um, People are both unhappy, angry, sad. I don't know. It's tough.
And I also want to say, because I'm on TikTok so much, I thought we were going to win with the Gen Z vote because it was the first time Gen Z was going to vote. A lot of Gen Z was going to vote in this election.
Well, I guess this would be the younger half of Gen Z. The first
Yeah,
time Gen Z voted was 2020, right? I
right.
think to your credit, the first time Gen Z had the vote, they were very pro Biden. They hated Trump, right? And that was the story 4 years ago.
And what happened? Yeah, Gen Z did vote, but guess which part of Gen Z voted? The men.
Yeah. Yeah. And also I think women flipped or stayed at home, right? I do think there were Gen Z women who flipped to Trump because they weren't happy for whatever reason for the last 4 years. We've outlined a bunch of the reasons. But I think the most obvious one would be inflation, right? Economy, cost of living, losing their
Yeah.
jobs.
They all see, Gen X and boomers having these mansions, right? And these cars and this life. That's what social media is showing you. But now they can't afford it.
Yeah, I
American
think
dream. Most people cannot afford the American dream.
there was someone who was talking on one of the mainstream media who was actually making a good point. Like, if you're someone in middle America and you have to go home at Christmas and tell your kids, I can't get you a gift this year, um, or we can't do Disney World, we can't go on a vacation because I didn't, make enough money, or my job, lost my job, got a worse job. They're not feeling very good about their lives. And I think Harris and, let's say, Biden, Harris, like the Democrats, they're not giving a message where they're like, we're going to help you. Like, they feel very left out. They feel forlorn. And, maybe it is a part of the feeling of, the old, they took our jobs from South Park, right? Like, especially with the illegal immigrant stuff, it's like, okay, immigrants are coming in, taking jobs, we're losing ours. It's like, it's that same rhetoric all over again.
I am sad Kamala Harris didn't win. I'm stunned and shocked. I think this election is going to have a lot of repercussions for us as a society in terms of men and women. I think there's already a divide and it's
Mhm.
just going to widen, not even Democrat, Republican, but I think this also shows that the two-party system doesn't really
It doesn't. It
hold
doesn't
any
work.
value in our times.
Well, if you look at, our country way back in the day, we had three parties for a while, right? You had the Whig Party, the Democratic Republicans, and the Republicans, right? And the Federalists, I believe. So that was a thing for a while. And then you even had, as recently as like 30 or 40 years ago, I forget which there was a third party candidate that got like 10% of the votes or something like that. Like, there was a reason to vote third party. Now it's just been too long, two parties. Both parties have gone too extreme. And I can't believe I'm saying this, that Trump was the more moderate candidate. And that, I think a lot of people agree on that. And that's someone who's racist and who is a felon.
I just said that I'm going to get a lot of shit for that by saying he was actually not the worst candidate because, to me, JD Vance is who was scaring me, not Donald Trump. And that's wild for me to say. I'm going to get so much shit for that. But, I think I don't even know what to say. I
I
think he
think
was the lesser of the two evils.
I don't think, yeah. I just feel like most of the country, in terms of what most people want, the same thing, which is really what's frustrating. Like, we all want sort of a libertarian mindset, I think, where it's like, the whole fiscally conservative and socially liberal, like that's probably like 70% of the country, I think. or maybe 60, and then you have your tails, right? Like a normal curve. And you have people that are like the super right MAGA, and they're always going to vote Trump right wing. And then you have the super lefty libs that are going to vote the way they do. And their votes are their votes, but you have to go to the middle. And it's like the middle matters. Then even if you go a little bit further out, everyone is kind of similar. Like we want moderates, we want people that are like common sense. And I know it's difficult to hear. Trump had a lot more common sense policies, I think, at least the way he presented it. I'm not saying that it's going to actually
I think
happen.
he spoke to the people.
He spoke to the people and said a bunch of stuff. He could be completely full of shit, by the way,
Yeah,
right?
we don't know.
So, but the way he may have presented it, yeah, okay, that spoke to a lot of people. Whereas with Harris, I didn't see a message. I said that earlier, and I don't think she answered a lot of the issues except abortion. That was one issue. Great. I don't know how many other issues she was speaking and resonating with the common man about, you know?
I am from Florida and I vote in Florida, so my vote is irrelevant. I'll be the first to say I vote red local and
Mm.
then I vote blue for the elections. But
Most of our friends do that, by the way.
yeah, most of our friends do that. But I started getting concerned. Remember, I had gone to the DNC, I have campaigned, I have rallied, I've done whatever I could to get Harris votes in my little way.
Mhm.
That CNN town hall that she did was where I started to get concerned because she could not answer any of the questions.
Yeah. I think she also came off as very not genuine. There were a number of instances, like even as most recently as yesterday, the famous phone call where she literally took a phone call and then held up her phone. And it was the photo or the camera app. Another one was there was like a staged knock at right. They had a knock at the door of the pollster, and it was like so obvious that it was like there's nothing genuine about her, at least the way she's presented. I'm sure she is, but like I don't. Again, I'm blaming her people. Like, what are you doing?
Right.
I'm mad at her people. I'm not mad at her. It's
Why
like
did you put her in this position?
who are these people that are like running like the campaigns and advising, like just terrible job, just awful.
I think she had a solid chance in the beginning, and
I
then
agree.
the town hall and the celebrity endorsements, it just was the nail in the coffin.
This is just Hillary 2.0. It's the exact same thing. The same script. Instead of the Proud Boys, now you have like the weird incels, right? Like, taking over and they're the ones who, like you said, went to the polls.
And people like me who live in our little cushy elite bubbles are bolstering that story of weird incels. And guess what? I need to stop. We all need to take these people
Yeah,
seriously.
that's why I'm trying to be kind. I'm trying to be kinder. I'm like, okay, let me put myself in the shoes of a 25-year-old man or whatever, 22-year-old man who's never really talked to women, or let's say who doesn't have a great experience, and he's been told since he was 12 years old that he is a horrible person and white men are the devil. I would feel horrible about myself all the time, you know?
And they had a lot of people to look up to in this case, Joe Rogan, Elon Musk, to name a few. And
I
I mean,
think
the list goes on. Dana White.
even within the Republican Party, there were really good people like I think Tulsi Gabbard and Vivek Ramaswamy, and they're both Indian, so obviously
Yeah,
we do.
we like them.
But they were very um, good at getting on the ground and being respectful. I think we saw one of Vivek where he was, I think, in Pennsylvania and talking to an undecided voter who was like clearly pro Harris. And he was very respectful, listened to all his points, and he calmed the crowd down. And he was like, listen to this person, respect them. And he's like, I want you to get out there and vote, but I want you to think about these things. And I thought he handled those questions very well. And I just didn't see that from the other side.
And the whole story of JD Vance from where he came from to where he is now, that story resonates with a lot of middle America.
I mean, I will say I'm going to call bullshit on that because the guy went to an Ivy League school and he's calling himself a hillbilly. So like, okay,
I do think, again, I'm not going to get into the conspiracies. A lot of people are groomed for this, and I believe he was groomed for this path early on by Peter Thiel.
okay,
Can I say that?
yeah. Um, all I know is that everyone talked about how he was boning a couch, and then that went away. And Apparently, it wasn't even true. I don't know. I don't know how these things even got started.
And he went on these relatable podcasts, like Theo Von's podcast. Theo Von is like the quintessential hillbilly redneck comedian who I find hilarious. And the Harris campaign just did not reach those people. They didn't even
I
talk to them.
I think in terms of the aftermath, what I want more than anything is I want the Democrats to not repeat what happened 8 years ago. I want them to stop. Fine, blame whoever you got to blame, but then also spend a lot of time looking at yourself in the mirror, looking at your party in the mirror, and trying to fix the problems and becoming a centrist party again. Like become, don't focus on the whole woke
Be
agenda, right?
relatable. The woke agenda is what ruined all of this.
Yeah. Being like the woke doesn't work. Woke go broke, right?
Yeah. And I also see it in my own personal stand-up, right? When I talk about some modern topics where we've discussed this on the podcast, where we're at a crossroads, our generation, the millennials, where a lot of people aren't going to get married. A lot of people aren't going to have kids. We're seeing that. It's a phenomenon happening in our generation. But when I make jokes about that stuff, they don't land because at the end of the day, people are comfortable with what they know. And that's still new. And so if you're going to talk about, you know, the trans agenda, then people aren't going to listen.
It turns a lot of people off, and I'm not going to say what's right or what's wrong. But
Yeah.
again, you have to pander to your audience. You're a comedian, you work a room and you can kind of tell your show in New York is going to be very different from your show in rural Ohio, right? You have to cater it. And I don't understand how this keeps happening that Democrats think that they can run the same playbook over and over again to the same demographics of people. It's just it makes me so frustrated.
I think we were also discussing, and I don't know if you agree, I said Hillary Clinton should have never lost. That's where this all happened, really.
That's a really good point because if Hillary had won, that would have actually created a different Republican Party, I think. So, that would have happened. Hillary wins, the Republican Party changes and goes back to the middle, which would actually be good for everyone. Trump is gone, never comes back. RBG retires, and she retires under Hillary, which was her plan. And then someone gets, put on the court that's very similar to her, and then we don't have all this abortion stuff,
Or
in the
we don't
news.
have to live through MAGA.
Right. And all this, so that's actually one of the great what ifs, if you think about it. Yeah.
We'll see. Do you have anything else to add? I don't think this is good for our country. I know
I,
people
I
are saying,
just want
oh,
to, I
stock
just want
market went up. It's all temporary, guys. This is all temporary. There's a lot of work to do. And
the
whether it was Kamala or Donald Trump,
Mhm.
it's not an easy road ahead.
Yeah, I think that the Republicans need to hopefully not go too ham with their power because we know what's going to happen. They have 2 years, right, of unchecked power, and then the midterms happen, and we know what's going to happen in the midterms. The Senate's going to swing back, maybe the House, and then who knows what happens 2 years after that. And then I want the Democrats to have a real plan, like a real plan this time. We want someone in the middle, someone like you know, Clinton, not Clinton, but Clinton type policies from back in the day, or even Obama, who spoke to a very big group of people. We need someone like that again. We have not had that person since Obama, the Democrats. We can keep running the same type of people out there. And yes, Biden did win, but Biden won only because people were fed up with Trump, right? And I don't know if Biden would have beaten him again. I don't know.
I don't think so. And I got to see President Biden at Diwali at the White House, and he was stuttering in his speech then as well. I feel terrible even saying that because I'm so grateful that I was there, but it was nothing different than what you've seen on TV, where this person is too old to be the president.
But this goes back to, a problem that I have with the Democrats is that they don't know when to leave. They don't know when to get out. Biden, we always knew should have been a one-term president. A year ago, if he had stepped away, they could have had a proper DNC primary and picked someone that would have been the most likely to beat Trump, and that would have been a slew of candidates that and let's even say, oh, everyone hates women. I think Gretchen Whitmer, she would have been great. She would
Yeah.
have won. Um, she was just more likable, I think. And I'm sure there's other people I'm not thinking of. But then, and you go back even further, I mentioned RBG, like if they had convinced her to get out under Obama, that's one SCOTUS seat that would have been saved, and we would have had all this abortion stuff. So that's two instances of pure arrogance and hubris of the Democratic Party. They suck at politics. The Republicans, say what you will, they're excellent at politics. They know what to do. They know when to leave. You can bet your bottom dollar that at least one or two of these old Supreme Court Republican justices are going to leave under Trump in the first 2 years during a Republican Senate. We know it's going to happen. And that's because they're smart. They know how to play politics. And I want the Democrats, I'm begging you, learn how to play politics, do it right. And the number of mistakes that you keep making over and over again, it's so frustrating.
It's frustrating. I was sick to my stomach, but because I've already been through this in 2016, it wasn't as painful because the writing was on the wall. I'm just stunned. I was speechless for about a few hours. I couldn't believe it. And in our chat, you guys called it. You guys called it, but why did you
Disappeared
call
for a
it?
long, we
I'm the
disappeared for a long time.
because you guys are listening to all these podcasts. You've got your ears on the ground. I am not listening to the manosphere. I'm not listening to Andrew Tate and Joe Rogan, and
I don't actually even listen to those people,
no,
but
I
the
know, but I'm
important
saying
is
you were researching.
I know it's going on. That's the key. You don't even need to listen. I will never download Rogan or Andrew Tate, but I go on Twitter and I'll see a clip every now and then, right? So I at least know what's going on. Most people are absolutely clueless
Yeah, I'm in
still.
my echo chamber with Betches, I am 30 AF, all these meme accounts. Like, we have no clue what's actually happening. We're following Hermes, Birkin accounts. Like, we don't know what's happening. And
I
I
would
think,
love for people to see what a middle American, slightly right-wing Instagram account looks like and the things they follow. Like they're not following Quentin Quarantino or the places that you
right,
posted.
or travel and leisure.
Yeah, they're just, they have their own world. They're probably looking all over Joe Rogan type Instagram accounts and seeing different things. I'm sure Elon Musk. Um, yeah, it's a different world.
What do you think happens? Trump says, here are the keys, do a great job, and he hires a bunch of expert politicians and plays golf? Or do you think he's going to be heavily involved? Or he passes the baton early on to JD Vance, which is
I
terrible.
think I think he's going to be involved in the stuff he cares about. So I think the stuff like immigration and like obviously Ukraine because he has that whole Putin relationship. I think Israel, like there's certain things he will be very focused on. And then there's other stuff that is going to be less important to him. And there's I think your husband posted in the chat about seed oils or something, right?
Yes.
So like
And
there's like a whole
RFK and the health
like
policy.
he's not going to do a thing about health and FDA and Department of Health, Department of Education, but he's going to put the people in charge. And I will say I hope someone like Vivek Ramaswamy gets a good position in his, I don't know which, I haven't researched, but he's the type of person that would be good in his administration because at least he's articulate and he's someone that I think isn't crazy. But that's just me. I know a lot of people think he is, and I think another thing that needs to, I don't know, stop is like everyone's so scared to say anything pro any Republican to the point where the only person I can really ever say I've ever liked is Mitt Romney, and everyone's like, that's acceptable, and that's fear mongering of some
But
kind.
but that's why I had an issue with MAGA, because the reason people are scared to say it is because MAGA stands for racism. When you think MAGA, you don't think of unity.
Yeah, it's true. No,
That's
I
the
hate MAGA
problem.
too. They ruined the Republican Party, which I used to support.
It's a cult.
Yeah, they're
It's
called.
a cult. And I was hoping we would do away with it once and for all. And at the bottom line is we didn't have a good candidate.
Well, I
from
think
your side.
there were two scenarios. If Trump had lost, MAGA would have been killed. And if Harris lost, which she did, the Democrats would come to the center. One of these two parties would come back to the center. Now, my concern is that the Democrats will not learn their lesson and come back to the center. I hope they do, but they never learn. And if the Republicans had lost, they probably would have just been done with Trump and maybe gone back to the center. Yeah.
And we can only hope and pray, as you said, that now that the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, the presidency is all red, that they make some moderate decisions.
You just have like a fully functioning government now where no one's going to block each other. No more filibuster, none of that stuff. So like, we'll see. We'll see. It's scary, but also a lot of people listening, I feel like you're going to be okay. I feel like we all lead pretty
Yes.
privileged lives, right?
A lot
Like,
of people were saying, oh, how can you say c'est la vie? I said, well, I'm not going to let this consume me. And at the end, I don't want to be divisive. I want to work together and make the best of the situation and rather find solutions to see how to move forward.
I think that everyone should try to make some money. I think that it could be a good time to make, if the economy improves and whatever, like maybe inflation goes down, maybe it's good for the housing market. Like, so try to take the wins that you can, right? Like, whatever way you can profit or do better with Trump, then work that way, right? Maybe enjoy the drop in crime that likely happens, right? Enjoy maybe we get healthier. Maybe there's a change in education, as I mentioned earlier. Um, I'm sure there's some good that comes out of it. There has to be.
Yeah.
And also with all the abortion stuff, I know everyone's scared of that. I truly do not think there's going to be a national abortion ban. I don't see it because they had this whole thing about how abortion is for the states, and I don't see them going and changing it to an abortion ban when it's, you know, been put to the states. The states have voted on it. They're going to go back because if they do that, they're going to cost themselves the midterms and potentially the next line. And they're always thinking for the next thing. And I think my view is the Republicans have abortion where they want it to be. They don't want any part of it in the presidency, whatever. And they just said each state should vote for it, right? Whatever you want to say, that's what our country is. And each state can deal with it, whether you're red or blue. I think the national abortion ban will not happen. That's my view.
And I just want to give a message out there to the women listening who may just feel disheartened and dejected and hopeless. Focus on making money.
Mhm.
Money will buy you independence, freedom, choices, educate yourself, work hard, and the rest will fall into place.
I would also say that there are a lot of good men out there that not just the liberal men, there are good moderate men out there that are pro women, and probably even some Republican men there out there that are pro women, right? Like at the end of the day, a lot of Republican men are getting married and whatever, and they probably are voting for things besides abortion and whatever. Like they just have other issues that are relevant to them. And yes, there is a 10 or 15% of people that are anti-women. I'm sure there are, but there are bad apples all over the place, right?
Yeah. I'm sure I'll get trolled for this podcast and you as well. I feel like
I
we don't mind Donald Trump.
I feel like we were pretty fair. I feel like I was just talking about a certain type of person and how they may have voted and why they did what they did. I'm trying to be objective here, and I have not really put any of my opinions down.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Speculation.
Thank you for coming on all the way from India. It's like midnight there now. I don't even
No,
know. Is
it's
that
1 o'clock.
correct?
Working late. I've been up for almost 24 hours with this election, and now we sleep.
Yeah, I've been up for about 24 hours. I'm still digesting. And I think we had a good, honest conversation that we would have in our chat. And whoever's listening,
This is actually a very tame version of what we talk about in our chat. It gets kind of heated.
it gets heated, but at the end of the day, we have to work together, right? That's
And it's
whoever's
it's good.
listening.
I'm seeing that there was not much violence yesterday, so that's already a step in the right direction.
That's because you've got the libs, you've got us on the losing end. What are we gonna do? Nothing.
We saw some of the rioting during like the BLM stuff, right? So I think, that was a potential possibility, but I think everyone's kind of just, I don't know if it's defeated or just kind of like,
Everyone was also, everyone's in the same boat. Like you said, we have more in common than not. And a lot of people are looking for some sort of change, and people are really hurting right now with regards to the economy, which seem to be the number one issue.
I think the big thing to look forward to is in 4 years, we're getting two fresh candidates, right? There's a lot of fatigue with the whole Trump and all the people I mentioned earlier. Please, let's just get two completely new people, right? Like, and yeah, I'm sure it could be a Vivek Ramaswamy or a Tulsi, like, yes, but they're not technically like related to that many people from before. They're fresh, they're young. We cannot have the same old, decrepit, you know, Trump, Biden, or Biden's VP. Like, we can't have those people again. We need something fresh faces.
Agree. All right. Well, thanks for coming on. I hope you guys enjoy this.
Anytime.
Bye.